more 3D and interactive. So the web is really getting much, much more interesting. So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to learn how these things work and how you can make them do your own bidding. So without further ado, let's introduce just a couple more sort of mental things with which to proceed, and then dive into this programming language, PHP. So this is just a slightly more complex example of HTML that allows you to include other files in your web page. So recall sharp include from C, which allows you to include a header file inside of your own C file. Well, HTML has a similar mechanism whereby if you want to put all of your cascading style sheet information, font color red, font size 24 point, and so forth, if you want to actually put it for design reasons in a separate file, you can do that in a file called, say, styles.css, which is also going to be in your public HTML directory. And if you want to tell a browser that, hey, by the way, you have to go and load another file before showing the user this web page, you can use the link tag here. Link and then rel for relation equals style sheet. And then href here is not a link. It's saying, go grab this other file called styles.css from the server and then use it to display this web page. And we'll see in a moment what something like this might look like. Below that, you see a script tag. And you might be able to infer from this that this relates to this language called JavaScript. So in a week or two, when we're writing JavaScript code, if we want to integrate it into our web page, but not just copy and paste it into the actual HTML file, but keep it separate for good design purposes and readability, similarly, can we include a file like this? Now, just to give an example of how this works, if we go to, say, even cs50.net, and I just happen to know from the source code that if I go into, let's see, styles.css, that's not it. I don't seem to know. Let's do this. I don't remember where we put it. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click or control-click, view page source, and you'll see that there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here. And the formatting is actually pretty messy because a lot of the CS50 website is generated by a computer, by programs written in PHP, so we don't ever really manually type this out. So if I kind of scroll through this, and it's actually a little messy here, that's what I was looking for. I wanted this link tag, which says the stylization for CS50's website is apparently in a folder called CSS, not styles. That's what I got wrong. And in a file called styles.css. So let's go there. So let me update the URL to be that and hit enter. And what we'll see in here is more complexity than we'll dive into for now. But you see a whole bunch of things. Let's find a simple one like this. So you might recall that atop the course's website are often these things called announcements at the very top of the page. And right here, we have a mention of problem set 5, problem set 6, and so forth. And this box always has a little FYI logo up there. It's kind of gray background and blue links. Well, the means by which we did this was in here. Long story short, we have a div somewhere in the page for this rectangular set of announcements. We gave it what's called an ID, which is just a unique identifier, so that we could say there might be a dozen divs on the page. This is the one we want to stylize. So div sharp sign FYI, and then the open curly brace, close curly brace. And inside of that is, again, this thing called a CSS property. The font size of those announcements we decided should be 77%. Now, what does that mean? Well, we gave some thought to what the default font size should be on the website and decided the announcements should be 77% the size of the default size. And then how about this? Div sharp sign FYI A. Well, A is the anchor tag. This just refers to the very specific div in the web page where the announcements go. Well, this is what gives the announcements their color, the specific color we're using, which is a light blue. And text decoration none. You might recall that on the web, by default, most links are underlined just to draw attention to them. But this is falling out of vogue. So the means by which you disable underlining is a CSS property called text decoration : none. Do not decorate the links. And so this is, again, just a teaser of the sorts of things you can see, and just realize that the CS50 site is more complex than a typical one. And frankly, if we go to something like Facebook, let me go ahead and pull up view page source. I mean, you'll see a whole bunch of HTML here, also machine generated, so it's a bit messy to read. But if we scroll to the very top, there's the doc type. So that part of our story is true thus far, that's part of the web. HTML is there. There's some other attributes that we haven't used, but those don't really change the story. There it is. Title, welcome to Facebook, log in, sign up, or learn. And here is some CSS. So let's see what Mark and company have been writing in the way of CSS if we go, let's choose this. I have no idea what this file name means, but I'm going to copy the URL, paste it, and it looks like someone at Facebook wrote all of this CSS. If I take this one here, someone at Facebook wrote all of this CSS. And again, not interesting to glance at, except there are some sort of self-explanatory things, things about background images. So that's how they have some image on the screen, things about width, and so forth. And then if we go to JavaScript, just as a teaser for next week, let's go into this cryptically named URL. Here is a whole bunch of JavaScript code that someone wrote, lest you completely freak out as to what's on the horizon. They wrote this JavaScript and then did what's called obfuscating it or minifying it for reasons of bandwidth and cost, and also sometimes intellectual property. You might write JavaScript code in a very readable way. This is not what we're going to write. You use nice indentation, nice variable names, nice function names, and the like. But when it comes time to post that code on the internet, clearly any random guy with a browser can look at it. And also, white space is useless for a computer. It's only really useful for a human. So to save money, because transferring data, certainly on Facebook scale, costs money over time, because they have to pay someone to transfer data, and because they don't necessarily want MySpace or someone else copying all of their fancy features outright, you can minify it, which does not make it impossible for smart people to figure out how your code works, but it raises the bar. And this, too, is a theme in security and intellectual property in general. You really can't keep someone from figuring out or understanding or even duplicating your handiwork, but you can at least raise the bar so that it's more time consuming or more expensive them to figure it out than it would be if they just started from scratch and wrote it themselves. But the exception there relates to anything server side. So HTML, CSS, and as we'll see, JavaScript is all client side, so to speak. It's in the browser. All the PHP we write, all of the database stuff we do, is going to be server side. And that's where really the intellectual property is. And frankly, Facebook's value is in its data, and it's in its users, not in some random JavaScript code that they've been writing, as much as that might please users. So let's take a look now at a familiar website and see if we can't implement a little something like it ourselves. So here is google.com. I'm going to go ahead and do one thing first, because Google is getting a little too fancy for its own good. I'm going to go to Search Settings, and I am going to turn off Google Instant. Google Instant, as you may know, is a feature introduced a few months ago, and it all of a sudden shows you your search results before you hit enter. I want to kind of do it old school style so we don't get ahead of ourselves, because I want to actually have to click a submit button before we actually search for something. So here we have now